Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Mental Health Family Hour. Now, today's episode is all about becoming a new parent, but we've also got some other things that we're going to talk about as well within this episode. So, thank you for joining us, and thank you to our five wonderful guests, actually. And if your daughter comes in, Danielle, at the end, we'll have more. So, thank you for joining us today. So, if you are new to this webinar series, my name is Sam Tyrer. I'm the Prevention and Engagement Lead at Lancashire and South Cumbria Foundation Trust. I'm also the founder of a service called Change Talks, which is basically an educational service which aims to prevent ill health. And I'm also the co-host of this show, Dave.
And I am Dave, aka Mindset by Dave. I operate online under that name, helping people with education around mental health, trying to basically fill in the gaps that I needed when I was a kid and beyond that. I am definitely not a new parent. I am very much an old parent with two teenagers under my belt these days. But the way I actually look at that is, you're still a new parent every year because they're different kids. I've not got 16 years of experience of being a parent. I've got 1 year of experience of having a 16-year-old. Yeah.
I like that. That was
Improv,
very new,
off the top of my head.
Yeah, well, no, I think you've been jotting that down, to be honest.
Yeah.
So if anyone has any questions, pop them into the chat. Dave will monitor that as we go along. We will pick them up at the end. And if you want to ask any questions following this webinar, then please do email me on sam.tyrer, so that's Tyrer, at lscft.nhs.uk. So let's begin this webinar. So could we first ask Melissa and Esme to introduce yourselves, please?
Hi, I'm Melissa. I'm from Family Action. I'm a breastfeeding supporter and also support new mums through pregnancy and when their little ones arrive.
I'm Esme. I'm from Family Action too. I'm the same. I do breastfeeding support and anything to do with pregnancy and babies and support, really.
I think I'm going to end up asking you loads of questions as well, because my wife's currently breastfeeding, so it'll be quite interesting for me to gain an insight. So thanks for that. Danielle?
I'm Danielle. I'm a mum of two. I've got a 5-year-old, and this is Miles. He's nearly 5 months old, and he was born in lockdown 2.
Lockdown 2. And Louise.
Hi everyone, I'm Louise Hamer. I'm the named nurse for Safeguarding Children in Lancashire and South Cumbria Foundation Trust. Been a nurse for almost 20 years now, and was a health visitor for quite a long time before I moved into safeguarding. Also got 2 little people of my own, so I'm really looking forward to this webinar. Thanks for inviting me along.
Brilliant. Thanks, everyone. So to start with, how I thought we'd start this is to talk with Danielle, just to share her experiences of becoming a parent in lockdown 2, as you said. And also, I'll be able to contribute to this because I had my daughter in August last year. So I'd imagine we'd have similar experiences. So I'm really interested to listen to what you've sort of experienced, Danielle, especially in regards to comparing it to your first child as well and all that experience. So I'll hand it over to you.
Yeah, so definitely a different experience to when I had Bonnie, which was mine and my partner's, obviously our first baby. We experienced everything together, scans, extra scans. Even like I was in hospital a couple of times when I was pregnant with Bonnie, and obviously he could come and see me throughout the day. But with Miles, it was totally different. Before I got pregnant with Miles, I lost the pregnancy. So obviously when we got pregnant again, it was a really nerve-wracking time anyways. If anyone's ever lost a baby, they'll understand that it's so hard. So like first scans and stuff like that, like it was all on my own. I was sat thinking, I'm going to get bad news and I'm going to be on my own. And, I'm going to have to walk through the corridor on my own, and thinking I'm not pregnant anymore. And then I was at Miles, he's a bit of a lazy bugger. So I was in all the time for reduced movements as well, and a couple of extra growth scans and stuff like that. But again, it was stuff that Lee couldn't experience with me. And even though we'd already had like our first child and he'd done all that with me, it's just such a shame that they don't get to see the baby on the screen and stuff like that, especially because he was so dying for a boy. It was like a new experience for him because he was seeing like his son, and yeah, it was really, really hard. And when I got admitted into hospital, they said they were going to induce me because they were worried about how he was moving. they did let Lee come in with me from the beginning of the induction because, like you said before, Sam, you had to drop your partner off. And I just had this expectation of induction that it was completely horrific. You want to go in and go into labour like straight away. So I was really panicking. But thankfully, they were nice. They did let Lee come in with me like from the beginning. And I'd also had quite a big scare at 32 weeks where they thought I was going into early labour. And again, they did let Lee come. Well, initially I was in on my own, and when they were like, oh no, we think like we're going to have to give you steroids and stuff for the baby, they did let Lee come in. But 10 minutes, I would probably say 10 to 20 minutes after I'd give birth to Miles, Lee tested positive for COVID. So he was like sent home. I'd literally just had Miles. He'd come out looking like a little purple alien. He couldn't hardly breathe. And I was just on my own in this room, like left with this baby. I was desperately trying to breastfeed him, and he just wasn't having any of it. And I think I got checked on once the whole time, from Lee going to me being like, I want to go home now because I'm on my own. You know, there's no use in me being here. I didn't feel like I was getting any support at all. Like, I was just stuck in a room. My partner had just been diagnosed with COVID. I was worried about, have I got COVID? Is the baby going to get COVID? You know, like, what's going on? And I was told that Miles wouldn't get COVID because like we did establish breastfeeding after like quite a few hours, but he did end up with it anyways, and I ended up with it as well. So yeah, 3 weeks we didn't see anyone for after I'd give birth to him, because we all had the disease.
And how was you all quite unwell with it as well?
In all honesty, it's quite hard to say we were like super ill, because we had a newborn baby. We were absolutely knackered anyways, because you are. I would probably just say that I had a really, really bad headache. It was like a proper like splitting headache. And Lee just felt tired. But again, we just had a baby. We were doing shifts of going to sleep, waking up. And then Miles got admitted to hospital with jaundice on day 5. So again, it was big red mark on the door, like you can't go, like they've got COVID. So if you go in, it was like full PP for the nurses. Again, I was on my own with him. He was they said, off the top of my head, I can't remember, but basically he was very, very yellow by like day 5 when they'd come to check on him. And I think they said if his levels were like 150 or over, I might have got this wrong because it seems like such a long time ago, that he would need to go under the lamp for like a night. Anyways, they rang back and they were basically just like, you need to come up now. Like his levels are, I think they were like 498 or something like that. Like he's severely jaundiced. Went up to the hospital. He was like, took out my arm straight away, stripped down, blood test, all in the space of 10, 20 minutes. And they were like, we don't think these lamps are going to work because he is like quite jaundiced, the worst we've seen in a while. Could be that you're going to have to go to Manchester, like Children's Hospital again. All this on your own. It's all just put on you, and it is so frightening. And I was just looking at this beautiful tiny little baby that I had, bawling my eyes out, because it's so hard to do it on your own. And like Lee is a really, really big support in my life. Like he supports every, decision I want to make with the children, and to do it on your own is so daunting, truly.
Yeah, I can imagine. I'm sorry to hear what you've been through prior to having your baby as well. It must have been really difficult for you. Do you know when you was actually pregnant then? I know from my experience, especially when COVID first, came into sort of public eye, there was a real fear between me and my wife around catching COVID. Was it then going to cause her to have a miscarriage and everything? Was that something that you experienced?
Yeah, I mean, because I'd lost the first pregnancy, and that was like, I think it was around about the first lockdown, the first week, I lost the baby. And I was like, I know for some people they can't go ahead and then feel like they want to try again, but I was just so like, I love being a mum. I was like, I want to try again. Like, I just want a baby so much. And for me, losing the baby made me feel like I really wanted it even more. and Lee was like, come on, like, we don't know what's going to go on in the world now. Like, there's this new disease. Like, my sister was like, really think about what you're doing, because she was pregnant as well. We've got children close together. And she said, I live every day in fear. Like, I just don't know what's going on. But so it did affect us in a way that it was kind of then having a bit of an impact on what do we do. And I just thought, I don't want to wait for the world to go back. I mean, thank God I never, because here we are, like a year and a bit later. But yeah, that it impacted our decision. I mean, I've been really, really lucky. I work on the railway. I'm a conductor, and Northern Rail were really, really good with me. Like, they didn't want me to come to work at all. Like, I've not been to work since last May. They've supported me like financially and stuff, because they were frightened that, they didn't want a pregnant one working on the train. It's a high risk job when you're pregnant anyways.
Yeah.
But then with the COVID as well, they were just like, there's no way, like, we're going to take that risk. And I know a lot of people, most people probably wouldn't have had that from the company that they work for.
It was the same with my wife. My wife's a sister in one of the local hospital trusts, and her ward got turned into the COVID ward. So she's been off since February last year. So it's like the longest maternity leave ever. But, it's the whole sort of maternity leave in itself has not been the same, not being able to go to baby classes and everything like that. I know from a partner's perspective, you don't want to show that it's upsetting you that you can't attend the scans and everything like that. But actually, it's really impactful, especially, it was mine and my wife's first child, and not being able to attend these sort of.
That's who I felt really, really sorry for, is the first time parents, the first time mums that are experiencing the classes. And, I've been quite grateful, because by the time Miles came, things were just starting to ease up. So, like, we've started going swimming, we've started doing like heartbeats, which is a local class. But then the likes of like my sister, she's not done. And she's a second-time mum. She's not done anything with her little girl. Like, she's not been able to do one class at all.
Yeah. And it must, I know I know my wife got quite upset, on a couple of occasions, not being able to see people. And especially when our daughter was first born, the family members were coming round, not all of them, but they had to wear masks. They were putting on gloves and all sorts of stuff just to touch Lily. And that alone I found heartbreaking. Did you experience that as well?
Yeah. Because we had COVID, obviously we didn't have anyone in, but it was like the looking through the window, like it was just like, what is going on? Like, it's crazy. What world is this where, like, my mum, who I'm really, really close to my mum as well, and she's really close to my children, is meeting a grandson through a window.
Yeah, it's heartbreaking, isn't it? And in terms of sort of your aftercare, and obviously I don't want to say anything negative about anyone, because I think the whole situation has been so difficult for, parents and healthcare staff as well. But in terms of like a health visitor coming to see you, was that the same as your first pregnancy? Have you seen them as regularly or not?
I've been so lucky. My health visitor, Sarah, if she's ever going to watch this, she's amazing. And I had her for Bonnie, and she was fantastic with Bonnie. So I have been really lucky that way. And even when we had COVID, the midwives and everything still came, but it was like mask, visor, gloves, apron. Because of Miles's jaundice, like, he lost quite a lot of weight, and he was very sleepy, and he wasn't very good at feeding. So I had more checks than, say, like, a regular baby that was gaining weight fine, blah blah blah, didn't have jaundice. So in that way, it didn't affect that, no. And my health visitor has been amazing. Like, she's been there for me, like, when I've suffered a little bit with postnatal depression after a few weeks, checking on me, and just saying whenever you want to pick up the phone. And it wasn't empty promises. Like, I could pick up the phone and ring her about the most stupid things. You think when you have another baby, you know the world. And I've been worse since I had Mars. Like, I've been questioning everything. And for Sarah, like, she's just been like, yeah, it's fine, like, I can help you, I'll ring you or send me a message. And she stuck to her word 100%. But I know like, I'm on a mum group, and I know that they've not all had
different experiences. So when you was actually in the hospital on your own, did you find that people were asking if you were okay? Because I know how traumatizing that must have been for you.
Do you know what? The I kind of feel, looking back, when I look back at it was, Lee, you need to go, you've got COVID, they might as well painted a big massive X on the door, and it was like, go in if you need to type thing. And I knew that things weren't right with Miles. Like when I look back at photos and stuff of him, he didn't look like, you know, a beautiful pink little baby. Like he was blue. He could hardly breathe. He wasn't really feeding. And it was me like saying, come on, please, can someone come and look at my baby? Because I've had one and she came out like absolutely fine, feeding straight on the boob, absolutely loving it. He was just like, I kind of knew that he was going to be different. Does that make sense? I don't know if it was mother's instinct, but I said when I was pregnant, I was like, I just know he's not going to come and it's going to be like an easy ride. I kind of felt like there's going to be a few little bumps along the way.
And you said you was induced as well, didn't you, beforehand?
Yeah, and to be fair, the induction, it was a bit crazy. It wasn't as bad as what I thought. I thought, because my mum got induced with my brother and she was like, oh God, like, I hope you're going to be all right. But I went into labour pretty much like 3 hours after being in hospital, and I'd done hypnobirthing because I had a bad time with Bonnie. So I wanted to sort of correct all that before I went into labour with Miles. And once I got on my way, like I had a really, really nice positive experience in labour, and Lee was really on board with like the hypnobirthing as well, and sort of kept me grounded when I was getting a bit crazy. So yeah, that was all great. The midwives were great that looked after me because they had a changeover like halfway through, but I was lucky to get 2 really good midwives. It was just kind of, for me, a little bit sad what happened afterwards. I kind of felt a bit more abandoned.
Yeah, I can understand that. It was similar to myself in a way. My wife got induced, and I had to drop her off at the hospital and then basically leave until she was being induced in her own room because she was consultant led. So then I was able to go back, and then basically I was there for it all. But as soon as I had to leave, then I wasn't allowed back. So I know that was a bit heartbreaking for her. But wow, honestly, just reflecting on the birth and everything, the strength of women and watching her go through that, and obviously other women and stuff, I was just like, wow, this is just amazing. And I remember
what take you back, definitely.
It's watching the contractions and everything. I was like, wow, that is I wouldn't fancy that myself. So it's the most amazing thing in the world, though, and it has been difficult not being able to share, my daughter, and I'm sure for yourself, with family members like you normally would. And I know that when we come to having another one, hopefully in the future, that will be a completely different experience.
I think it's hard as well because like we had some family members who were like, no way, we're not coming over. Like, not necessarily I had people that broke rules and people that didn't, but you've probably experienced it yourself with friends and family. You've got some who are, willing to maybe bend and push it a little bit, whereas you've got certain people who are like, no way. So there was like, my brother didn't meet until he was about, I think he was about 8 weeks old, maybe, when my brother met him, because he was really, like, he's got other family members, like, through marital that were high risk, so he just couldn't risk it, because then he would be, because at this point we could have bubbles and stuff like that. He couldn't take the chance of like breaking the bubble, if that makes sense. So then you had people like, oh well, I've met him, oh well, I haven't, blah blah blah. And to be honest, you shouldn't even really care, but you can't help it. Like when you've got some people have met him, some people haven't. It's
the only one benefit that I could see from sort of after my daughter was born was actually because of the current situation, we could control how many people could come round. And who
that
could
was
see
a big bonus.
Because the first week's a complete blur because you're knackered. And then all of a sudden you're looking after this, tiny little thing. That was one of the perks, I think, of it. Other than that, there's a lot I would like to change. And we found as well that because people were wearing masks, there was a lot of stranger anxiety early on. I think earlier than expected, which was it was upsetting watching my parents hold her and she was screaming when we was giving her to anyone else but us two. That was heartbreaking. I remember texting my mum saying, I'm sorry, as if it was my fault in a way. I just felt so bad.
You feel responsible in a strange way, don't you?
Yeah, definitely. Anyway, Danielle, thank you very much for sharing your experiences. I could probably just talk to you on a one-to-one basis all day.
We'll just do our own one of the days.
Everyone else should go. It's all right. So what we'll go on to now, because obviously you mentioned breastfeeding and everything as well. So we're going to go on to Melissa and Esme. If you could tell us about breastfeeding. I know the first point you wanted to talk about was BFI. So what is that?
BFI is the baby friendly initiative, and the health visitors, children's centres and some of the hospital trusts are taking it on board, and it's to support breastfeeding, to change the conversation around breastfeeding and encourage the uptake is quite high. It's around 80% at the moment, but then it does slip off, and it's about the support that mums get with breastfeeding, and also to have a unbiased conversation about formula as well and things like that.
Can you just mention, you said then about 80%. What can you just repeat that?
So the uptake of breastfeeding mums in hospital is around 80%, but because they don't have the support or the knowledge and understanding of some of the breastfeeding techniques, and they don't feel confident enough to access, quite often by day 5, the numbers do slip. I'm not sure of the figures after that. I'm sorry, we could probably look it up. Which is quite sad. And we do often find that mums want to continue to breastfeed, but for whatever reason, they don't feel supported by either breastfeeding supporters like myself or the health professionals, which is why it's important for everybody to be on the same page, which is why this initiative is so important as well, because quite often, I don't know if Danielle's experienced this, they will start offering formula as a means of feeding baby rather quickly, instead of giving the mum and baby time to establish their own flow with it. I don't know if that's something you experienced, Danielle, whether with Miles or Bonnie.
Yeah, well, I mean, certainly, obviously with Miles, I spoke to you anyways, didn't I, when he's not long been born, because I knew that you were the pro. But yeah, because he wasn't gaining weight, it's not looking at why he's not gaining weight, it's how shall we gain weight on him. So it's like, just top him up with formula. And I'll be totally honest, I really wanted to exclusively breastfeed Miles, and I haven't been able to, but that is because it's almost feels like, and I don't mean this to anyone who's feed the baby's formula at all, it's like a trap. Once you start and you see different things, it's hard to get out of it. So we just like combination feed now, like full time. But yeah, it's always not looking at why something is happening, it's how to fix it, but probably not in the right channels, if that makes sense.
Yeah, in the hospital, they're very focused on numbers. So they want the baby to be gaining weight, and they want them to be taking so much, and breastfeeding's not always like that. So hopefully there is some changes coming. The hospital trust has started to make them changes in Barrow. And like I said, the children's centres and the health visitors are getting through the stages of accreditation, so we can support them as well. I think it's a whole team approach to change the culture around breastfeeding and make it more normal, because it is biologically normal for babies to breastfeed.
What do you think sort of puts people off? Because I know a lot of people have had babies over the last 12 months. Some of my friends, some people I just know, and there's only a very small percentage of people that have decided to breastfeed. Many have just gone straight to the bottle. Why do you think that is?
Definitely is. Yeah, it's seen normal to formula feed. Breastfeeding is the abnormal form of feeding, unfortunately, which to us we find strange, don't we? We breastfed both our children, and yeah, it's just weird that people think that that's the norm.
Some people have never been around it either. So if you get someone from a family that has always been around formula feeding, never been introduced to breastfeeding, maybe have never even ever thought about it, and then all of a sudden it becomes like an option. It's like, oh, well, no, I'll just stick to what I know, kind of, and then you get parents from that family, well, you were all right, or do you know what I mean? So then it just carries on. So, I mean, I personally I'm from a big family. My mum breastfed all 6 of us, so it's always been completely normal to me. So then when I had my children, it was like there was no other option. That was just how you fed your baby, and and that was it. But obviously, on the other hand, if you've only ever knew formula feeding, then it must be hard to kind of change that when you have your own kids.
And do
Whereas
you
for
Can
think?
I jump in?
Yeah, go on, Louise. Yeah.
I mean, something that I found as a health visitor was you grow up as a little girl with dollies and they've got bottles. So you grow
Yeah.
up thinking that's the way you feed a baby, that's the way you play. And you only really think about breastfeeding when you're pregnant, when you're an adult. And there's so much information about breastfeeding and how positive it is. And it absolutely is wonderful, but it's not easy. And it doesn't come naturally to anyone. So I think some mums are really shocked about how hard it is. And they think they're doing it wrong, when actually it takes 6 weeks, doesn't it, to establish breastfeeding. So you do sit there with your pajamas on and your boobs out and constantly feeding and nobody's sleeping. And that is what breastfeeding looks like. And I think some people just aren't prepared for it and they think they're doing it wrong. And then they start getting all that feeling of self-doubt and then they reach for a bottle, and babies find bottles easier because they just have to lie there and have a cuddle and open the mouth. But actually breastfeeding, they have to practice as well, don't they?
Yeah, it's definitely a relationship between mum and baby. So it's a learning process between them both, and it can be tricky. But like you say, bottle feeding and formula feeding seems like the easier option, whereas it often isn't the easier option.
I have to be honest. Like my wife is just exclusively breastfeeding. Lily would never take a bottle. And I'm going to ask you a question now earlier on than I was going to. So my wife is going back to work in August now because she's a nurse. She does 12-hour shifts. What I'm really concerned about is because she's exclusively breastfeeding, Lily won't take a bottle when it comes to that bedtime period, because she's all right throughout the day, with having food or whatever. But when it comes to the bedtime period, she's used to going on the boob and then going to sleep. How do we introduce her to a bottle there? How would you advise that? Because currently she won't take it. Is it a sippy cup? Do we use a normal cup?
Might be a bit of trial and error and trying a few different things. She may reject all of them, and it might be worth using a comfort teddy or a comfort blanket with the smell of mum on that she's worn during the day, just so she has that smell of mum when she is going to bed. There is no hard and fast rule with these babies, especially when she's only had the boob for such a long time. It'll be tough, but you'll find a way, and she won't need it. She'll just want it. And I think that's important to remember, that she doesn't need it. It's just her preference.
I'm dreading it because I know there's going to be a lot of screaming. And honestly, I'm dreading it. Anyway, I'm asking personally.
Well, I'll just add to it. You can give her the milk out of any cup. Yeah. Whatever's her preference, even a sippy cup, or because my little girl was saying no teats, no dummies, nothing. She would not budge for anybody. Nothing. So you can just try even a cup, anything, or even a spoon for it, get the taste of it. But it's more the comfort that we look for at that age, isn't it?
So she might not even need the milk. It might just be the comfort of another item, like a teddy or a blanket, or just a cuddle. You know, she won't need the milk. You know, she's saying she's eating plenty during the day. She's going to be getting the milk at other times. It'll just be quite stressful if she's getting distressed, and you know that the thing that will soothe her isn't there.
And so when a woman does begin to breastfeed, obviously I don't know because I'm a male, what makes it really challenging for women? What are the sort of difficulties? Could you just talk them through that? So, because as a man, I'm interested to learn more about this.
So the latch can be quite difficult because it's, like we've said earlier, it's a learning process between mum and baby. And even if you've breastfed before, second, third, fourth children can still struggle with that latch because that baby's never breastfed before. Mum might be more confident in holding baby in certain positions, and it's just practice. And this is what babies are born to do, and this is what breasts are made for. So that's a challenge because sometimes babies come out quite sleepy. It's quite common for babies to be sleepy after being born, and there is that rush in hospital to get food in that baby. And quite often they just need time, and then also adjusting to the baby's routine. We're not looking at a clock, we're responding to their cues, and that can be quite demanding as well. Mm-hmm. Babies go through quite a big growth spurt around 5 to 6 weeks, and if mums aren't prepared, that's quite a common time where the rates slip again because they think they can't fill baby. But breast milk's made on a demand and supply basis. So the more babies at the breast, the more milk will be made to feed that growth spurt. And then it will plateau off again after a couple of days. But if mums aren't ready, they're unsure of what's going on, they panic and think, I can't fill this baby, I'm going to top up with formula, which is what Danielle mentioned. And then you're in a slippery slope of your breasts start making that milk to feed baby.
Yeah, just to jump in at that 5 to 6 week is when I was like, what is going on in my life? Like, yeah, completely 5 to 6 weeks is just like, be prepared for the craziness, I think, of that time period.
Only lasts a few days. Our advice, we say, get a box set on Netflix nowadays, chocolate, drinks, new pajamas, and just get ready for a sofa day for 3 to 4 days. And it passes, and then you're kind of like, oh, right, I got through that. We're back to normal, you know. But
the feeling of getting through it as well, even just on that particular night, you're just like, yes, like I've done it.
I could do with that sofa day myself, and I'm not even the one breastfeeding. I'll take the chocolate. So you've mentioned, Melissa, about you've not mentioned it, but something you wanted to talk about was the solihull approach. Is that how you pronounce it? Could you tell us about that?
Yeah, so it ties in with BFI because the BFI underpins what their approach is. So a lot of our courses are solihull approach. So we've got an antenatal course, a postnatal course, and some for older children as well. And it's about the responsive relationship building, and that's what breastfeeding is about. It's building a positive, responsive relationship with baby, and that can be also mirrored in formula feeding as well. But it's just being responsive to baby. Is there anything you want to add?
No, maybe just going back to BFI, not totally to go back, but we do also offer with the BFI how to safely formula feed, to safely make bottles. So it's not all about breastfeeding. We do support every mum that's struggling with feeding. And then obviously going back to the solihull approach, we have parts in there that we go over feeding, breastfeeding, formula feeding, sleep, routine, all that kind of different things, isn't it?
Yeah.
And what are the benefits to breastfeeding?
So many. So it's a living fluid for baby. It's totally natural. It's tailor-made for baby. As a new mum, you'll have an instinct to sniff baby's head. And as you do that, your body's producing antibodies to then give to baby. I don't know if Danielle will remember doing that, but your body's then creating lots of good things to pass on to baby. It is good for gastroenteritis and gastro issues, respiratory infections. It lowers the chance of children getting childhood cancers. It also reduces the chance of obesity as well. You want to add something for mum?
Less chance of breast cancer and osteoporosis, is that right?
Yeah, bone disease.
And long-term obesity, things like that. And to be honest, I think just from a personal point of view, I just kind of had more energy. I know it sounds crazy because it is really, really hard breastfeeding, but once you've got everything like established and everything sorted, you just kind of feel a lot more like, I don't even know how to explain it, but you sleep better because of a night time when you're feeding baby, you release a hormone that helps you get to sleep easier and helps baby get to sleep easier. So you're not up making bottles kind of thing, and because your body's releasing that hormone, you get into a deeper sleep quicker. Mm-hmm. So when you wake up in the morning, even if you've had 4 hours sleep, I always felt more like, refreshed and not really that tired.
I agree with that. I've got loads of new mum friends that are like, oh my God, I'm exhausted, like 4 months sleep regression. I've not slept this good in ages. Like, because I well, but I've not experienced any of this like sleep regression that the babies that have, like, he's going through his 4th sleep now. He's like literally maybe the first 3 days he was a bit crazy, but yeah, I mean the sleep thing, I completely agree with that. I mean, I have had a few in 5 months I've probably had 3 or 4 days where I'm like, oh my God, how am I going to get through the day? But yeah, generally the sleep is great.
And imagine that skin to skin is really nice as well for the women and the baby.
It's so nice. I never co-slept with Bonnie, but I do with Miles, and it makes my heart so full. Is like the only way that I can put it.
That's another thing what we say. So when you breastfeed, you release oxytocin, which is your happy love hormone. So you release that oxytocin, baby releases that oxytocin, and it's like a rush of it's a
love. You can't explain it,
but it is. No, you can't. It's like it's like a full feeling, isn't it?
Yeah,
it's like,
absolutely, yeah.
And even that's like the most, I think that is the most enjoyable part for me, because you can feel it from, I miss it some days. It's not been that long since I stopped, but
and as a dad, how can we help our partners?
You can do skin to skin. We've touched on skin to skin there. I mean, obviously, dad won't get the hormonal response of making milk, but you'll still get the other benefits. So baby's heart rate will regulate to yours, and the temperature will regulate to yours as well. You'll still get that yummy feeling of having baby close to you. It will give mum a break, which is great. And it's just really nice for you for dads to use that tool for bonding and as a means of calming babies. If baby is getting overly upset, just having baby in that kangaroo position on the chest, it's almost like switching a switch sometimes. You might have experienced it in the past.
Yeah. Especially when they're tiny little things. There's no better feeling. Now she wriggles around and puts her head everywhere, though. She don't want to lie there as easy. So I know, Danielle, you mentioned about struggling with postnatal depression for a while. Could you sort of tell us, Melissa and Esme, just a brief bit about postnatal illness and what is available out there for people if they are struggling with that?
We've got some new groups being set up, which we don't have all the details. I think Ziana shared a post there for you to share, but that's going to start in June, I think, in Dalton. And it's just to support them mums who need that little bit of extra help and talking about how they're feeling in a safe environment. Everyone's going to be going through the same thing, and kind of just settling them worries that it's okay to feel like they're feeling. It can be really difficult bottling them feelings up and feeling like you're the only one going through it, when quite often it's a sliding scale and quite a lot of women will be on that scale with you.
I think a lot more people feel alone. Well, obviously, a lot more people will feel alone going through what we've gone through, especially new mums. That partner goes back to work and then they are just completely on their own until partner comes back. So it's great that all these groups, we're starting all these groups up and people can come along and actually have a conversation and offload to other people, and for them to share their experiences and kind of feel like, oh, well, maybe I'm not the only one that's been feeling this way, and gain support just from seeing other people.
And it's really difficult because as mums, we think this is what we're made to do. We need to do this and we need to do that and we need to get through it. When actually it's not sometimes that easy.
Yeah.
And you don't have to do it alone. There's lots of support out there for you.
I'd imagine that's really difficult as a new mum as well. You start doubting yourself, and which, especially like the first couple of days and everything, your hormones and everything must be just completely all over the place. And that alone must bring you sort of crashing down in a sense. And it must be exhausting. What you put your body through and everything is just
the minute I opened up about feeling that, and I did feel really bad, but the minute the words came out of my mouth, what I wanted to say, it's so cliche, but I literally feel like everything come off my shoulders, because like has just been said by Melissa, you feel like this is what I've got to do. Yes, it's hard, but suck it up and get on with it. When it's not, the day that I spilled everything out, that how I was feeling, I wanted to walk out the house and leave my children. Like, I felt so bogged down. And the minute I told my sister and I was just like, this is what's going on, I was like, oh my God, what a release, because you're not alone. And I think a massive part of feeling when you've got postnatal depression and stuff like that, and you've just had a baby and you become mum, you've lost your identity. Like, I'm not Danielle at Gut that used to go out and have like a good time and go partying. Like, my life now is my children, and it always will be. So when you know that there's other women that have almost, their mum now as well, you realise it's so much easier to tell someone. And I would always say that, I know I'm a massive talker, as you can probably tell, but the minute you get it out, honestly, you feel so much better. I cannot even stress that enough.
I think what worries me is, especially over these last 12 months, there hasn't been a lot of sort of maybe potentially support groups that have carried on working the way they did. So how many mums have we potentially missed? Because
and
I know,
going to another group and saying, do you know what, Karen, I feel that way as well. I feel like that too. But you haven't been able to experience someone saying, yeah, I feel like that as well. I've had a really, really bad night, or I've had a really bad day, blah, blah, blah. So I think that's been a massive part of it, is the fact there's been just not even like a play group, which is something so normal to meet other mums at.
Yeah, and I suppose if there is any new mothers watching, if you're listening to this, and please do reach out for support. We will put some links on the YouTube description at the end. So please, as I said, do reach out for support. So before we come on to Louise, I've just got 2 more points that we want to talk about. Well, there's actually 3. So breastfeeding out and about. Can you just talk about that, Melissa? Because I know that can be quite challenging for some women. I know from a male perspective, and having seen my partner breastfeed in public areas, in all honesty, I have to be honest that I've personally found it uncomfortable. Not on her behalf, but how. And it is men. How many men stare? And it just feels like sometimes they're just staring and staring and staring, and it makes me feel very uncomfortable. And I have to be honest, it makes me want to go over and say something. I want to be open and honest here. And I can understand there may be people staring because they don't see it that often, potentially. But I also feel, from my own perspective, that they're trying to stare at a breast. That's how I feel anyway. And just want to put that out there, and I'm being totally honest about it. Now I'm going to hand it over to you, because I'll end up getting on a rant. This guy did this.
It is scary. It's scary for mum. It's scary for partner. It's scary whoever you're with, because you are worried about that confrontation, because it's publicised so much in the media about how sensationalist it is when a woman breastfeeds in public, whereas that baby still needs feeding, and legally they're permitted to feed anywhere. It's illegal to challenge a mum about feeding in public. And it is scary, but it's about being proud of what you're doing. You're providing that baby with the best thing that you can. Going back to how you feel when other people are looking, it probably is just interest, because it is so rare for people to see it. I can't imagine there is any kind of sexual innuendo behind it or anything like that. It probably is just interest.
Because we do it, don't we? We've spoke about this. If someone's feeding, we kind of like you want to look and kind of give them the nod,
high five,
because it's so nice to see, and because you don't see it a lot, and obviously, like we've said before, some people have never seen it.
Yeah.
So, and when the thing is, when you breastfeed, when you're out and about, you don't really show your boob. It's only what you would kind of see when say if you had a vest top on, or do you know what I mean? Because the baby's head's there anyway, and you don't really see the whole. Do you know what I mean? So I understand what you mean, but I understand what you're saying, because I have been in situations myself where I've been like, what are they looking at? But then you kind of just got to take your mind back and think, maybe they're just, intrigued. Maybe that person's looked at me and then gone back and breastfed their baby a year later, or something like that. Do you know what I mean? That's how I actually kind of changed the way I thought about things.
Yeah. Yeah, I know what you're saying. I think that's just me being protective, to be honest. And it doesn't help sometimes when my wife said we won't stop looking. Then obviously, you're like, oh, we won't stop looking. Obviously, I'm not a confrontational person at all, but it's something that I have to be honest, it has made me feel uncomfortable at times. And I can understand people, they don't see it that often, but in 1 or 2 situations, sometimes I feel like they do need to take the gaze away. It can make someone feel uncomfortable, I think, after a while.
Yeah, absolutely.
But anyway, moving on from that. So just to sort of end on your section, if that's okay, because we'll need to move on to Louise now. Support groups and online advice, where can people go?
So we've got a Facebook page, Barrow Family Action.
Yeah.
All our groups are publicised on there. We have baby time sessions, which have started up face-to-face in all of our centres. So they're from birth to walk-in. We have got a breastfeeding support group starting up in June, and the information for that will be on the Facebook page. I'm not sure if Diane sent over a poster for that. And our antenatal and postnatal course is going to be a rolling programme. So if you would like to email one of us, we can then pass on that information when we have it.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. And I will share a list to my mailing list, and we'll put some details on the YouTube description as well. Dave, do you want to ask any questions, by the way? Because I've actually gone 45 minutes without Dave saying anything. I think that's a record.
I'm all good actually. I've just been sat here doing literally nothing. I'm keeping I'm keeping up with chat, and that's about it. So no,
Right,
I'm good.
Perfect. So Louise, I'll hand over to you now if that's okay.
Yeah, of course. So I come to talk about three things really. One is around the transition to parenthood as kind of that huge life-changing event and the impact that has on both parents' mental health, and then some really key public health messages around ICON, which is around how to cope with babies that cry and safe sleep. But it will sort of link in with what Esme and Danielle have talked about already, some of this already. So it is good that it'll all come together, hopefully. And I suppose the first message for me that's just so important is becoming a parent is stressful. In the same way that other life events are stressful, like moving house, relationship breakdown, divorce, redundancy. And I think the difference between becoming a parent is there's so much expectation that it's going to be amazing and wonderful and joyful, and it's a time of celebration. So if you're not feeling like that, if you're feeling scared or worried or unsure, or actually that was pretty traumatic and I felt really, frightened, or I don't really enjoy this right now, it isn't quite what I thought it was, there's almost no space to talk about it, because people come around with balloons and presents and cards and they want to take your picture. And there's no time to actually say, can I just say I'm absolutely scared to death, or that was awful and it wasn't like what I thought it was going to be. So I think that's a big thing, because parents who are feeling disappointed, scared, worried, or a bit unsure almost feel like it's wrong. Whereas if you'd got made redundant or you'd divorced, everyone would be expecting it to be pretty rubbish, and everyone would be asking how you are and what support do you need, and what can we do to help. But it's kind of a mismatch when you become a parent. It's all the nice stuff for everyone else and you're left feeling with all those mixed emotions yourself. And I think the whole term of postnatal depression is interesting, because for me, I was a health visitor for over 10 years. Feeling sad, overwhelmed, tearful when you just had a baby is completely normal. If that carries on sort of 8-12 weeks later, that's something different. But feeling a bit tearful and, oh my God, this is not quite what I thought it was going to be, is normal. If you cry when you've lost your job, you don't suddenly get diagnosed with depression. If you cry when you get divorced, you don't suddenly get diagnosed with depression. If you are somebody who suffers with low mood, a stressful life event is likely to trigger a depressive episode, which really is what postnatal depression is. So it's a depression first and foremost. It just so happens to be in the postnatal period because it is so stressful. Sorry, Danielle, I can say you're trying to chip in the little live.
No, I'm just agreeing with everything you say, yeah, because I'm very like, if something's going wrong, I'm like, what you say, I'm inclined to be that way. But when, like you say, it was going on like further into the weeks were going by, and then I was getting intrusive thoughts almost, I think that's when you need to, like you say, it's like, okay, it's not baby blues, it's
I need some help, and there is loads of help. And I think the key message for me is to let people know that it isn't unusual to feel like that. And I remember when I first had my baby, the first baby was so traumatic. I was a health visitor. I felt I had all this pressure for it to be natural. I was going to use a TENS machine. I wasn't going to have an epidural. I was going to breastfeed. And it all went out the window, and I was frightened to death. And we ended up having an assisted delivery. She was born 5 on 2s, so traumatic. She had to be resuscitated in front of me. And then I was living away. I didn't have my friends or family nearby. Felt so lonely, but almost this pressure of, I've got to hold it together because I'm a health visitor. I should know what I'm doing. And people were coming around with gifts and taking pictures, and I wanted to say, by the way, I thought we were going to die, and it was absolutely awful, and I'm pleased someone helped me. But there was no space to say that. Or if I did try and drop it in, it was, oh, well, she's here now, and look at her, and she looks great, and you're doing such a good job.
The baby's all right, but what about mum?
So you're left carrying all that worry. And then I guess the dust settles, and you're into life goes back to normal. You might have your partner home for a couple of weeks if you're lucky. And then everyone else carries on, and you're left with this little person who you don't know very well. You've been through a traumatic potentially experience. You're tired. You're not eating properly. You might have, money worries about being on maternity leave, or your partner might, you might have some financial worries about trying to support both of you, and now a little person as well. you might be arguing a bit more than you were previously because of all the stress, and you're tired, and also you've never probably discussed parenting styles until you've got a baby, and then you realize that maybe you do things slightly differently to each other, and that can be a source of tension. Also, relationship with family members changes overnight. So people who might not have shown much interest in you before, I'm thinking my experience was my mother-in-law at the time. Suddenly I wasn't just her son's partner, I was the mother of her grandchild, and that just changed overnight, and I found that really intrusive, especially because my own mum wasn't close by, and I wasn't prepared for that. I think the other thing that as well that some people aren't ready for is that emotional roller coaster of feelings of grief and loss can suddenly come back and hit you in the face when you've had a baby. So particularly if you've lost a parent, you might have felt like you've grieved for that parent. It might have been 10 years earlier. When you've got a baby and you're looking at that little person thinking, oh my God, my mum or my dad is never going to meet them. They're never going to know my mum and dad. It's like that grief is raw, and it's like you've lost that person all over again. Similarly, feelings of rejection. So if you've not particularly had a good experience as a child yourself, or you've got a strained relationship with your family, or you've been adopted, that feeling of rejection can be really raw when you become a parent for the first time, because you're suddenly looking back on your own experiences with completely different eyes, and you become quite critical. My mum jokes because she'll say, oh God, how did you ever survive? Because suddenly not putting sun cream on me and me spending every summer burnt to a crisp, I became quite angry about it, because I'm looking at my children thinking I would never do that. So you see things so differently. It churns all these emotions up, and it can be really, really challenging. So yeah, it's amazing, it's wonderful, but it can be difficult as well. And I suppose the message is it's difficult for everyone. So you might not think it is because of social media and the pressure, and at baby groups, you know, there is this, you know, you want to present the best case, don't you, of your family life, and you don't necessarily talk about all the difficult things.
I think it needs normalising. Sometimes it's hard, and your child might be like covered in sick from the car journey at playgroup, and you don't have to feel like, oh my God, like I'm not a good mum. Like,
no. You just got to get through the days. The first 6 weeks. First 6 weeks are hard. I think you tick it off day by day. And when I was a health visitor, you talk to mums about almost scoring your day out of 10. So 10 being amazing and not being the worst. And over time, you will see you get better days. But there'll always be that day where you've had a rubbish night's sleep, and you might have had a bicker with your partner, and you might just think, oh, I don't know what I'm doing with this breastfeeding business. And you'll feel overwhelmed. But if you can look at a visual reminder, think, actually, this is one bad day over the last 5 days. I can carry on. I just need to get through today. Call someone to help you. Speak to your health visitor, your midwife, or a family member, or your partner. Get someone to come round and let you have a sleep, or just take, you know, if you've got a toddler, let someone take the toddler to the park or something so you can have a break. You know, let people help you, and be reassured that everybody has those days. It is not easy, it really isn't easy. You can't be a parent wrong, you can't do it wrong. And I think that's something, when when you first walk out of hospital with this little person, you're almost waiting for someone to come and tap you on the shoulder and say, what are you doing? You're not taking that baby home. You're like, are they trusting me with this little person? And they are, because your mummy, your daddy, you will figure it out. All babies need is to feel safe and loved. You cannot do it wrong. You might look back and laugh and think, oh God, can you remember when we did this, or remember when we did that? And you might do it differently next time, but you absolutely cannot do it wrong. And similarly, if somebody's had 100 babies and you perceive them to be the baby expert, they don't know your baby like you do. So you need to trust yourself that you will figure it out, and you will get to know your baby. It isn't always instant. And I remember as a health visitor being talked, about all the different cries that babies have, and you get to know what cry means what. And I never ever figured it out. She cried and I went through sort of a mental checklist in my head. Is she wet? Does she need feeding? Is she poorly? Take a temperature. Does she need a cuddle? Do I need to sing to her? Maybe she wants to go out in the pram. So you go through a checklist. I never figured out which cry meant what. But sometimes we get these messages and it puts pressure on us, and you think, oh, I don't know what cry that is. Maybe it's because I'm not a good mum, or I don't understand it. But you go through that checklist, and eventually over time you settle into the role, and you'll never look back. It's life-changing, and you only become a parent once. And just think, I know we've talked before, Sam, about how cheated you can feel, that it is this one-off life-changing event, but it's happened in the middle of a COVID pandemic. And you're not able to socialise and meet new people and meet new parents who are going through the same thing, and you'll never get a chance to go back and do that again. And that's really hard, and it is sad. But I just think how resilient the parents are that have gone through this and have held it together. And, you know, baby's been born in an absolute historical moment in time, and in the future, it's quite a nice, I guess, story to tell the grandkids, isn't it, that we survived this pandemic, and everyone's alive, you know, and happy. So I suppose that was the first message I just wanted to say. You know, it is tough.
Do you think that social media has made parenting harder? You know, especially as the child grows up, you'll often look on social media thinking, oh, that baby's doing that. They're the same age as my baby, but my baby's not doing it. Do you think that puts a lot of doubt into parents' minds?
I think so, but I think it's always been the same. So mum groups, you know, baby weaning is the classic. So you cannot wean your baby. It happens. You know, there's no adult on the planet that lives off pureed apple, but you will start to eat. And I think if you relax and just let baby lead you and you trust yourself, you'll get there. But if you go to baby groups or you read online, it can feel so much pressure that there's a way to do it. You introduce sweet potato at 6 months at 11 o'clock, and then you add and then you make it all yourself, and it's just so much pressure. Where I think if you throw the baby books in the bin and you turn off social media, and you just trust yourself that it's a biological instinct to look after your baby. And as long as you think they need to be safe, they need to be loved, they're the only things, you will figure it out. And it isn't easy, but you will figure it out. And I think you just have to trust yourself. You know, people have been having babies forever, haven't they? And here we are. So you can't do it wrong. I think
I've had a day where I've posted a picture of Bonnie and Miles, like, oh, I've had such a nice day with my little darlings. And do you know what? We've had me up the wall all day. We drove
Facebook versus reality, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, any picture I put on social media is probably about the 10th time. It's got a few filters on, and you know, it's best case scenario, isn't it? No one knows what's going on behind the scenes, and you have to sort of take it with a pinch of salt, don't you? Social media, and know that people are sharing the best moments, they don't share the worst, and it's not always a reflection of what life is like. And I think it's about almost that sense of camaraderie I think we need with new parents, that you're all in it together. I've been a breastfeeding mum, I've been a formula mum, I've been a working full-time mum, and I've been a stay-at-home mum, and it's all hard. All hard. And I felt different pressures and different guilt depending on which side of the fence I was at. But I know that I've always just tried my best, and hope that that's good enough, and that's all you can sort of cling to, really. But I think that sense of camaraderie is really important with mums and dads, and that you are in it together, and not, it can be tempting to split off into cliques, you know, when you're at groups and things, and you almost then stick with people who are doing the same thing as you, and it can become quite judgmental. So if a baby group, fabulous to go out and meet new people. Thinking about what Dave said earlier before we came online about social anxiety, I was thinking I've got to go to baby groups. As a health visitor, promoted them all over the place, made myself go, found them really difficult. So at some point I'd say, actually, that isn't for me. But I did meet some mums online through a chat, and then met in the park and had a play. So I found things that suited me and gave myself permission to do that. Rather than force myself into situations that I weren't comfortable in, because that's not good for baby, is it? They look at you as a sort of cue, really, is how safe the world is. So if you look panicked and anxious and worried, then they think that as well. So it's really important. I mean, I suppose the two messages that link on from that are around ICON and Safe Sleep. ICON is a national public health campaign, really trying to promote to all parents and professionals that babies cry is part of what babies do. They are often trying to communicate with us. Sometimes they just cry. So we have to try and soothe as best we can. Like I say, we go through that mental checklist. Do they need the nappy changing? Do they need feeding? Are they too hot, too cold? Do they just want to cuddle? Do they just want to hear your voice? So sometimes just talking out loud while you're, even if you're in the kitchen emptying the dishwasher, just so they can hear your voice is soothing. Do they just want a cuddle, like you said, Esme, about that kangaroo just being on you and being together? Or are they just crying? And it's really difficult to talk to new mums sometimes about some of these messages, because you can't imagine what it will be like 5, 6, 7 weeks down the line when you're not sleeping very well and you're tired and you're stressed and you've got a baby that's crying again at 3 o'clock in the morning, and you just think, oh my God, I'm rubbish. I don't know what I'm doing, and nothing I do works. It at that moment, it is perfectly okay to put your baby down, walk out the room. Once you know that you've gone through that mental checklist and they're in a safe place, you put them down, you walk away, get a brew, maybe take some deep breaths, get a bit of fresh air if it's in the daytime, ring someone and just say, I'm having a bit of a wobble, I need some help. That is perfectly fine. What we don't want is to create like a pressure cooker situation where people have got all this pressure on themselves and we've got a crying baby, and that is hard to know what to do and how to soothe them. So the best thing is always to put baby down and walk away, as long as they're in a safe place. So that's ICON, and hopefully people will see ICON posters up in the hospitals and in the children's centres and things. We're really trying to get that message out, and particularly with dads as well. So it's that sometimes can feel a little bit out of control, because it's mums that tend to try and soothe baby. And, just offer, if you've done all those things, do you want me to take baby for a little bit, because I might be able to rock them and bounce them for a little while longer, or distract them, and share that out. Or say to your partner, come on, we've done everything we can now. I can see you getting a little bit upset. Baby will pick that up off you. Let's just put baby down and we'll go and get a cup of tea. Yeah. And sort of be in it together and reassure. Yeah. The other message, I suppose, is around safe sleep. And we've given advice, in lots of different ways about safe sleep. But I know as well as anyone, when you're tired, it's so tempting to fall asleep on a chair, or get baby in bed with you and, have that cuddle in the morning when you're tired. I suppose, aside from what you've talked about in breastfeeding, the safest place for a baby is always in their own cot or Moses basket, but in a room with an adult when they're sleeping for about the first 6 months. And that's hard sometimes if you live in a flat or you've not got the space to have baby in with you all the time. So obviously, as much as possible, have them in with you for the first 6 months. Feet to the bottom of the cot. A blanket, a sheet, something tucked under their arm so they can't wriggle out of it, they can't get underneath, or a sleeping bag. Make sure baby's not too hot. They talk about sort of best temperature being about, I think I've written it out, 16 to 24 degrees. You can get a thermometer for the bedroom. It's better to be on the cooler side than the too hot side. Don't put a hat on baby to sleep, things like that. And never, ever have your baby in with you if you've been drinking, taking any medication that might make you drowsy, been smoking, or you're unwell yourself. So if you're unwell yourself and you've got like the flu or something, and you're going to be flat out and zonked as soon as you fall asleep, absolutely not safe to have baby in with you. And I think as a public health message, what's really important is if we do all those things, the chances of, we don't like talking about it, but sudden unexpected death, which a lot of parents are worried about, reduces by about 50%. So it's a really important public health message that. So like I say, sometimes we don't want to talk about some of the scary stuff, but it's really important that we give people the right information at the right time so they can keep baby safe. I'm going to cough. I'm trying to keep it in. When I'm like...
No, it's all right. Cough if you need to. I'm just letting you carry on, Louise. Is there anything else you want to say?
I could talk about it all day. I'm so passionate about it.
No, it's really interesting.
I think it's just pressure, isn't it? And you can it applies to lots of different parts of life, really. If we stopped labeling things and sort of defining what something should and shouldn't be, or what it should and shouldn't look like, and we just let people be, everyone would be much happier. It's the pressure and how we frame things that causes the stress.
I agree. Because we've gone over the hour now, I'm just going to go straight to the chat just to see if anyone has any questions or comments rather than me carrying on. Otherwise, we'll go well over.
Just one question, one comment. So quite straightforward. One saying, will we be sharing links to more info about the topics discussed in this session? Yes. I'm expecting my first and feel pretty lost and unsupported, so would appreciate all the info I can get.
Yeah.
So yeah, we'll get I'll get those links emailed over to me later, and then I'll pop them in the description of this. Plus Sam does send an email out as well.
Yeah. So if you want to join my mailing list, then just give me an email.
And Sam's, I think your email address is always in the description, isn't it? I think
yeah,
so.
It is. Yeah. Yeah.
And then just Deborah Moore said that I fed both of mine in public and was really lucky. I had no negative experiences. Lots of young kids coming up and asking what I was doing. Practice feeding in front of a mirror before you go out.
Perfect. I'm going to end then on just quite a sort of a positive question. If you are about to have a baby, what would you want as a gift from people? Now, the reason I say this, what I found was the best thing for myself and my wife was actually frozen meals to just put straight in the microwave. I found that. What would make your life easier for someone to get you, do you think?
A night in a hotel with an all-inclusive breakfast.
You know, I think something, the mums get forgotten. A lot of the gifts are for baby, which is fabulous. You know, they've got a brand new wardrobe, lovely things for the bedroom, but the mums get forgotten. And I think just one gift for the mum to go for a manicure or a pedicure, or just some time, a haircut, or just an hour to go out with her own mum to go, you know, for a coffee or something. I think, or time to go on a little date, even if it's just like you nip to Costa for half an hour or whatever. It's something for you as parents. It's something to celebrate and that you've gone through together. And while gifts for babies are amazing, I do think a little treat for parents is always really nice.
Melissa, Esme, do you want to come in?
I'd say food, definitely food. That's the best time of having a baby. My mum comes around and cooks loads of food, and I'm happy with that.
I remember really appreciating a hot bath, because I shared my bath with my baby, so obviously it had to be considerably cooler than how I like it. So I can remember writing a status saying, go and get a hot bath or a hot shower, and just that time to regather is really important.
Perfect. Is there anything else anyone would like to add before we sort of round this up?
I'll add a sneaky gift in there, actually. This was something that we really appreciated when we first had ours, and as a result, every time any of our friends have a kid, we'll get them clothes for like 6 to 9 months or 9 to 12 months. So like I'll go clothes that are further ahead, because generally speaking, the parents have gone out and bought all the clothes for now. And actually, so extra clothes for now is nice, but extra clothes for a period that, you know, because we all know when especially when they're young, it's like you're clothes shopping every 5 bloody minutes. So that was one. And usually whenever I give them to people, like, oh yeah, that's a really good idea, I never thought about that.
It's because you go through clothes like no tomorrow in the first stages, don't you? It's amazing on what you get through. Is there anything anyone want to add anything else before we sort of round this up?
Can I just say one thing, Sam, in terms of support? So it's just really important. I know services are under strain under COVID, but it's so important to remember that universal services are there. They're not as visible as they probably once were, but they are absolutely there. Every single person has a health visitor. You might not know who they are by name, and Danielle's been really lucky, but everyone has a health visitor, and there is no being referred or discharged. It's automatic from baby being born up to being 5 years old. So you just need to know who your local health visiting service is, and ring and ask for support if you need it. They are absolutely there. There is lots of support available. You just need to know where to find it.
Yeah. Melissa helped me a lot, and you weren't even at work, I don't think, at the time, Melissa, when I was sending you please through it. But there is always help out there, and if you are feeling in any way, just it's so cliche, but talking is just like the best thing we've got. Like, you know, the fact that we can talk is just, don't keep it in. There's no medals for not telling people that you don't feel stressed or you feel a certain way, you feel a bit down. I think everyone goes through it.
And just to add to that, along with the breastfeeding support, you don't have to do that alone either. Reach out. We do not know you're struggling unless you get in touch with us and tell us. You know, unfortunately, we can't knock on everyone's door and ask if they're okay. We'd like to, but we don't have the time, unfortunately. So just reach out, even if it's just to say you're doing well. We'd like to hear that too.
I guess really then that is a perfect note to end this live stream. So thank you all for joining us. Really appreciate your input, and all the information that you've given today has been absolutely fantastic. So huge thank you. Thank you for the people that have been watching. If you can share this afterwards, that would be greatly appreciated. And we will look forward to seeing you next week.
See you, everyone.